about to get into that very interesting conversation around taxes. I think it hits everybody in one way or the other, whether directly or indirectly. But just before we get into that, well, let's show you the moment when the German president, Dr. Frank-Walter Steinmeier, arrived in Nigeria. That was last night, and he was received at the presidential wing of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, by the Minister of the FCT, Mr. Nyesom Wike. Dr. Steinmeier, whose visit to Nigeria is scheduled to span through the 12th of this month, is expected to engage in a series of activities such as a meeting with President Tinubu, as well as a meeting with the President of the Commission of ECOWAS, Dr. Toure, amongst others. So just as we said earlier on, the German president is the head of state, while the German chancellor is the head of government. So this is the German president visiting Nigeria and not the German chancellor. Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's absolutely interesting how government works at different places. You know, ours is the same person, the head of state and the head of government. So our politics is slightly different, our administrative structure. Okay, so that's the Minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike, welcoming the German president. But let's bring the conversation right here into the studio, and it has to do with what all of us have been talking about for quite a while, since the presentation of those 4 bills that will transform Nigeria's tax landscape. And it has been a very contentious issue. It's past second reading, and that has generated loads of controversy, especially some provisions in that bill. And we're bringing it back to the fore because it's not over. The conversation is still hot and heated. We're joined in our Lagos studio by the National Publicity Secretary of the Youth Party, Ayodele Adio. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us via Zoom from Port Harcourt, Zaid Abubakar is the Chairman, Kano State Internal Revenue Service. Thank you so much, Mr. Abubakar, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Let me start with you, Mr. Abubakar. Since you're the taxman in Kano State, how does this resonate with you as far as this controversy is concerned? Because your brothers up north have, indicated their reservations in terms of this particular bill. It started with the issue of VAT and something that has to do with the religion. But give us an overview of what the tempo is right now. Are there more people now beginning to see reason why they should support, or there is that position that, look, this cannot go on?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Let me start by addressing some of the concerns. But before then, we need to really understand the objective of what the bills, are trying to achieve. One of the major objectives of what the bills are trying to achieve is really to consolidate various legal frameworks that we currently have in Nigeria. Currently Nigerians are fully aware of the various legislations that we have that are addressing taxation or trying to collect one thing or the other from Nigerians. So the whole essence of the bills are to consolidate and address some of these challenges that we have, which leads to multiplicity of taxes, and also to enhance taxpayers' compliance, and also to expand the taxpayer database of Nigeria as a whole. So these are the broader objectives of what the bills are trying to achieve, and that is what is missing in the entire conversation. And the reason why I think we have concern and agitations, I think, up here north, is simply because some of these discussions are missing in the entire context of things. So the concerns are downsing down because people are getting to communicate and engage with each other and one another. And I believe, the tensions are coming down, and some of the concerns now are more of targeted concerns, looking at some of the clauses of the bills to say, okay, these are the things possibly the North as a whole need to really look at and say, okay, there is need for amendments here and there. So the concerns are coming down because people are getting to read the provisions of this law, and they are getting to understand some of the concerns and the promises that the bills has in stock for all of us as Nigerians.
Let me come to you, Ms. Adio. The reservation by our brothers up north is a valid position, and so everybody's trying to walk around what can make it work better for everyone. From where you sit, if you've read that bill, there are 4 bills, in total, from the tax bill, the tax administration, down to the renaming and repositioning of the revenue service, and down to the joint board and all of that. From where you sit and your party, How are you perceiving this, and what is the way forward? Maybe in terms of the clauses that are raising concerns, because initially, when it was passed, people were arguing to the fact that we've not even gone to the clause-by-clause basis, so why all this argument? But some people have gone through it and said this is not going to work for us, especially the VAT element of it, as well as the other clause that I talked about.
Well, I mean, there are two sides to your question. The first, obviously, and I'd address the part of the North that you talked about, and I think the most contentious part for many leaders in northern Nigeria is the derivation part of it. And you know that derivation is arguably the most combustible word in our political lexicon in Nigeria. It always generates heated debates all the way from the 1940s till date. And that really is the crust of the matter. And it's largely because, you know, the VAT is a consumption tax. And you get rewarded based on the amount of consumption that happens in your state, right? In this case, some of the states are arguing, for instance, Borno State. The reality is how much consumption can really happen in Borno State today, given the level of insecurity, the level of banditry, the level of terrorism that has happened over the last decade, and the amount of poverty and unemployment in certain states in northern Nigeria. So that means that by extension, the level of consumption in those states, if you're going to then reward those states based on their level of consumption, they're going to have the short end of the stick. And that explains why you have a lot of these agitations. Now, but at a party level, our argument is on two folds, and more critically, it's on the legal part of it. Because I am not sure that that provision will scale a legal test or the constitutional hurdle. And I say this because there has been 3 landmark judicial decisions on VAT in Nigeria, starting from 1985, the Agba case with the Ogun State Attorney General, that clearly stated that VAT are a subnational issue. But what the court cleverly did in that decision was to separate intrastate VAT and interstate, and decided that states had the powers to collect intrastate VAT, but the federal government were the ones responsible for interstate VAT. Of course, interstate meaning corporate, customs and all of those things that happen across states. But that decision seemed to have been upturned in 2017 when Eco Hotels and the Attorney General of Lagos went to court, and the judge decided, striking down the consumption tax in Lagos, that it amounted to double taxation if you were charging VAT and a consumption tax. But the court did not speak to the interstate and intrastate matter in that particular decision. Up until 2021, when the Rivers State decision at the Federal High Court, where the court clearly decided that the competence of the National Assembly, to pass, levies or taxes, or to delegate the powers, for taxes or levies, does not extend to a sale tax or a VAT. So by extension, that decision clearly sort of, aligns with the Agba decision that the National Assembly cannot legislate on consumption tax. It's within the purview of the states. So once you look at those decisions, you would realize that it is unlikely, because the VAT is not on the exclusive list, right? It's unlikely for you to scale that constitutional hurdle to say that the federal government would be primarily responsible for collecting, VATs. And that for us is the primary concern. And the best way to do it, obviously, is either to pursue a constitutional amendment that moves the VAT to the exclusive list. But of course, that would be a laborious process. It's going to be very difficult to achieve. I think the wisest thing to do is to simply follow the Agba decision, wherein we separate the interstate collection from the intrastate, and the federal government can, do all of this derivation principle of 60% on the interstate and allow, the states to collect the VAT.
But as a direct response to that, Mr. Oyedele had made it clear that if we do not scale, if we do not allow this to pass through, so to speak,
yes,
and states, intervened and went to court to challenge the proposition, that what would be coming to them if they were to administer VAT would be lesser than this proposed derivation model, that has 3 templates. I can't really recall all of the 3 now. So how do you weigh in on that?
So, I listened to that argument that he made, and the reality is that he's right that some states will actually receive lesser if this reform is not passed. And by extension, this reform would actually deliver more revenue to certain states. But the reality also is that at least 10 states will find themselves with the short end of the stick, because they are likely to receive, less than they were collecting, as we speak today. Because like I said, the VAT is a consumption tax, and you're rewarded based on your level of consumption. And the question is, how much consumption is happening in Katsina today?
The reward according to consumption is in the new proposal.
Yes, in the new proposal.
So
yes.
let's contextualize
exactly,
it.
In the new proposal, that, of course, that's why it's called the derivation of 60%. So it goes back to where the consumption has happened. And so you ask yourself, how many spaghettis or soda is going to be taking in Katsina today, in Jigawa today?
Well, it will shock you how much they actually consume. By the way, Borno, for example, the example you gave earlier on, the government will tell you we've returned people back to their homes as a semblance of safety now. And that's something he has said, and that's talking about the governor. We've spoken to him time and again.
Yes.
Saying that it's not what it used to be. Fine, a lot of people still see Borno State as that, but that's not what it is right now. But I tell you, there are a lot of pasta is being consumed in those parts of the country. But let's go to Mr. Abubakar now. Maybe you can tell us how much of pasta you consume in Kano. But more importantly, it is a conversation around multiple taxes. And for businesses, small businesses, this is their concern. So a lot of people will naturally queue behind the tax reform, saying as far as this will reduce the multiple taxation, because you pay local government, same thing you pay to the state, and they keep coming time and again, and you wonder, come on, how much am I making? So for businesses, at least, to stimulate business, because you can't tax poverty, right? You only tax prosperity and productivity. So to that extent, don't you think states should just say, well, if this would help businesses thrive and eventually we can get from it, absolutely. Let's go ahead.
Well, as I said initially, part of the promises of the bill is to reduce multiplicity of taxes. Currently, as we have it in the tax legislation, small companies are exempted from paying taxes from 0 to 25 million. And the new bill is proposing to expand that exemption from 25 million to around 50 million. And that is a win for small businesses. And in the same bill, there is a proposal to say, okay, small businesses are going to be paid, or they are going to pay their taxes at 0 rates. That is also an exemption for all of them. Then there is also this harmonization between what the federal government is collecting and what the states are collecting, to say, okay, at the end of the day, we are going to have a sort of special development levy where a lot of these nuisance taxes, as we call them, will be taken out, and companies are going to be paying only 4% at the beginning, 4% of their total profit in form of development levy, fee, which is going to be 2030. So the bill is looking holistically at multiplicity of taxes as we have it today, trying to take it out so that small business will be able to have a larger space to breathe, and also to be able to form a lot of capital and accumulate wealth over time. At the local government level, the initial proposal was to say, okay, some of these 25 lists of revenues or charges that the local government do collect are also going to be harmonized. But the law, at the end of the day, falls short of trying to harmonize what is being collected at the local government level. I think maybe after the bill has been passed into a law, possibly through Finance Act that we've started doing here in Nigeria, some of these charges that the local government are collecting currently are going to be also, harmonized going forward. And that will make life quite easier for taxpayers. But as we speak, the harmonization focuses on federal and states, while that of the local government is still being maintained, which I hope after the bill is being passed is also going to be considered. But businesses are going through a lot. They are paying a lot of charges. Some are legal, some are illegal. And the bill is out to address some of these issues.
So just quickly, what's the term now? The fact that we saw northern states saying we're against this, do you think it was out of, or it was coming from an informed position, or it was just posturing, saying, well, let us show you we have power, we can stop this thing if you do not consult us or give us, because all through we've been hearing this favors the North more. So do you think it came out of a place of information, knowing what the bills were about, or just the usual political posturing?
Well, I would say I have engaged with a number of influential people across the North, and I try to understand that the bill has been subjected to a lot of readings, to a lot of simulation. And I would say it is coming from an informed position. And we are currently engaging with a lot of them to show them how things should be done. And specifically, let me point to what my brother, pointed out to. That is the issue of derivation. Quite a number of them are saying, okay, this word derivation has not been defined throughout in the bill. And if we are to attach any meaning to it currently, the derivation as it is does not really work as it is expected. What will happen after the bill has been passed? Because that is going to make matters worse. That is what some of them are saying. So I think the major issue and the concern that is being raised is around this word derivation, which has not been exhaustively defined in the bill. And part of the things I expect the framers of these bills are going to work on is on the definition and what it really means in the context of the new proposal. So, of course, the concerns are coming from an informed perspective, from what I've been able to gather across, some of the northern states.
So, Adio, let me come to you. Do you think that we're efficient enough in terms of fiscalization? Because if you talk about attribution, to be able to give that derivation that we all are arguing about at the end of the day, if we don't have the technology to be able to capture as much as we can, then all of this is just book talk. That's the way I want to put it. So, from what you have studied and what you've seen, at least the FIRS done so far, fiscalization, are you contented with that? Because if we're not good with that, we're not going to make any headway.
Well, I think that it's going to be progressive. I think that, speaking to collection rates and the ability to widen the tax nets and things like that, I think that there is enough competence within the FIRS to do that. Of course, you know that one of the bill proposes that they are, moved away from FIRS to become exactly, and they will be the sole collector of federal government taxes across the country. I think that there will be enough competence to be able to widen the tax net. But of course, where the problem would be, because one of the key points of the bill is that it's going to harmonize taxation and eliminate multiple taxes across the country. Now, the question, however, would then be, what's the capacity from the federal government to be able to harmonize it at the state and local government level? So if you're a small business person down the road here, how's the federal government going to stop your local government from extracting taxes and levies from you? Because that's the real problem that small businesses face, the multiple taxation, especially at the local government level. So, you can use the highfalutin words at the federal government level to say that this is going to harmonize things. But in reality, it will be difficult to eliminate many of these levies and taxes that happen, at a local government level. Like I said, in states like Lagos, for instance, it will be easy to harmonize because, for instance, Lagos directly charges a consumption tax of 5%. And once you're harmonizing that with, the normal VAT at 10%, it means there's a 2.5% savings for consumers in Lagos, isn't it? And that's why you hear things like Lagos is on the losing end, because it's sort of giving up its 5% that it was normally charging for consumption for a reduction to 2.5% to harmonize. So to that extent, consumers in Lagos are having some sort of a bargain, right? But again, you go back to a state like Jigawa, for instance, that was not charging a consumption tax of 5%. Now, their VAT has moved from 7.5 to 10%. So in other words, the average consumer in Jigawa State is now going to be paying more for goods and services and is having a short end of the stick. And that's where the complication is, that despite the fact that he'll be paying a higher sale tax, he's not going to be getting a reward for that because consumption in Jigawa is not happening at the level that it's happening in, for instance, in Lagos, Port Harcourt, or maybe in Kano State. And you see, that's where, for me, the contention is, because even at a national level, consumption has plummeted. The Manufacturers Association have consistently cried out this year to say that they have over 350 billion worth of unsold goods in storage facilities across the country because household expenditure has plummeted, purchasing power has dwindled, people cannot afford to consume. And so if you're going to reward people on consumption and then impose a higher VAT on them, surely and certainly you're going to have people complain and push back against it. This is not to say that the bill does not have a lot of good elements. I mean, bringing down corporate rates it's a brilliant thing to do. Corporate
That's where I was
taxes,
coming to.
Coming down.
They say perfection is the enemy of progress.
Yes.
So what will you suggest?
So I think we have to find a middle ground, right? And to be honest, let's call a spade what it is. Every time you use the word derivation, you need to look for a political solution to it. Technicalities is not going to solve the problem. There has to be a political solution where actors are carried along and a middle ground is found that sort of placates the people, the northerners on the other end of the aisle. And you can borrow from our rich history of all of these debates that we have had. I mean, just if you even look at the 13% derivation debate when Obasanjo took office and Obasanjo wanted to pay the 13% based on onshore. And there was an uproar in the Niger Delta, especially from Akwa Ibom, because most of their oil was offshore. And Obasanjo went to court, got a Supreme Court decision that gave him the constitution, the powers to only give 13% derivation on onshore. But what happened? Crisis started in the Niger Delta. He had to walk that back, sought a political solution, passed an act of the National Assembly that overread the Supreme Court decision, and the Niger Delta had their 13%. It's important to point out that the speaker then, the two speakers during that, entire debate, were from the north. One was from Kano, Galina Abba, and then the second, who eventually passed that, was from Katsina State, Aminu Masari. So, in good faith, the National Assembly at the time gave the Niger Delta the 13% derivation. In fact, extended it beyond what Obasanjo wanted, granting the continental shelf towards them. So I think the same way, we have to look for a political solution that says, okay, this bill has a lot of good things to deliver. The contention here is just this tiny thing on derivation. What is the middle ground that we're going to find? And please, I think it's also important to also look at the optics of it in looking at a political solution. Every actor involved in the derivation process, the president is from the Southwest, the FIR's chairman is from the Southwest, the tax committee chairman, Oyedele, is from the Southwest, the minister for finance is from the Southwest, the CBN governor is from the Southwest, and accountant general has just been appointed now, is from the Southwest, my brother now. So you don't expect people to have a bit of shiva. So I think that also pushes that a political solution needs to be sought somehow, some way for us to
so I hope and I wonder if, stakeholders will look beyond that parochial element of the conversation to the benefits of the tax bill. And let me bring this to Mr. Zaid. Mr. Zaid, you have submitted that the North's opposition to the tax bill is from an informed position, rather than, any other lens that we may want to look at it from. But let me bring to your attention what is proposed in the bill for Kano State that you represent for sharing based on derivation. What you had before cumulatively was it 12? Is it 12% now? Yes, 20%. But cumulatively, under the new proposal, what is coming to Kano now is 23%. Now, for other states in the north, it could be lower. So are you saying that based on the increase that is accruable to Kano State under the new derivation, the opposition, the unified opposition of the north, is informed rather than based on a religious or ethnic lens?
Well, I have to clear this. There isn't any religious or ethnic coloration to this. I think this is economics. Most of the discussions are around numbers. Now, I also have to put it on the table that revenue, sharing, has a zero-sum effect. Some will be gaining and some will be losing. Just as you have mentioned, Kano might be, gaining because of the consumption, high level of consumption that is happening in Kano. But if you go to other states, neighboring states like Jigawa or Zamfara, there isn't any much consumption taking place there. So while some states will be, gaining, a lot of them will be losing. So it is a zero-sum effect, activity. So as I said initially, I have engaged with a number of actors and commentators on this, and I've come to the realization that they have done a lot of simulation on this. They have, looked at the numbers and they've seen how the numbers are coming down to. A lot of states in the north, are losing if you take Kano out of it. And even Kano, when we did our own personal simulation, the numbers are not really increasing significantly. So that is how the discussion evolved over time, looking at the numbers. And I'm not holding brief for anybody, but I'm just trying to see things as they are, that the whole conversation is actually coming from an informed perspective. And what we are currently doing is to really re-engage and engage people across board to say, okay, why can't we do it this way? Why must it be derivation? Why can't you use other parameters as provided for under Section 162, subsection 2 of the Constitution? I also want to align with what my brother said, that what the VAT is a constitution and has a lot of constitutional hurdle to pass. And possibly this is one of the things the committee should also look into. The framers of the proposal should look into how to make VAT pass all these constitutional hurdles.
Because one would
this
think,
is what I have to say on that.
Because Mr. Zaid, one would think that since Kanu's benefit from the new tax bill is increasing, you would rather fight your own battle yourself rather than tag along with those who may have had their own benefit reduced. But speak to us about this. There's also talk about the North opposing this because of the tax reform bill being against their inheritance and Sharia laws. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that is a misinformed, perspective, because I have seen a lot of write-ups on that. Some are pointing to the family being mentioned under Section 4 of the proposed bill. Family and inheritance has always been mentioned in Nigerian tax law. So some are just trying to make, minor things out of the entire, proposal to say, okay, we're saying this because it is affecting our religion, this and that. But I don't see this as a major conversation, to even present on the table.
Right.
The family being mentioned in Section 4 has always been there in our legislation.
And that takes us back to the point about whether this is coming from an informed position or just maybe posturing, or some just following, following peer pressure, as it were. But back to the point now. You've tried to dispel the controversy around inheritance, family, and all of that. I know Mr. Taiwo Yedili has also done that. But our guest in the studio talked about the composition of some of these key positions, a lot of them from the Southwest. Another appointment was made Southwest, head of the reforms or the presidential committee, Southwest, president, Southwest, literally all those things, Southwest. You can confirm if this affects the optics, because we understand how politics works in Nigeria. First thing people think is, where's this person from? Rather than say, is this person competent? So these things affect the eventual outcome of whatever you're doing. So you can speak to us how this is impacting on the negotiations or the optics of this on the one hand. On the second hand is this, as the tax reform bills are right now, are you giving it a green light, at least for you? Are you giving it a green light? So at least we know where we're at and know how fast we're able to get there.
Well, let me start by addressing the first point you mentioned. That is not how to build a nation or a country if we begin to look at where an individual comes from. For me, as a Nigerian, and also the kind of training I got when I get into public service, we don't look at, people from the location where they come from. We look at delivery and competence, what they can offer, to Nigerians, what they can deliver on the table. That is what we're after. So I haven't had any conversation from the people I've engaged as to whether we're looking at the location of these, reformers or people that are, driving the entire reform. That has never been on the table from all the discussion I have been making or have been engaging with people. That is very clear from my own perspective. The second question you asked was around what? Sorry, I missed that.
The second question is about whether you're able to give it a green light, the tax reform bills as they are right now. For you, that is. Would you give it a green light so we can get over with this? This is 2024. Other countries are discussing other issues, right, for advancement.
Of course, other countries are discussing on how to go to Mars and other things. But here we're discussing about taxation and other fiscal reform, which is also very important.
Absolutely.
Well, if you want to take my perspective, the entire proposal is in the right direction, and these are the things we require for now. But we have to also go granular to address some of these concerning issues that, the number of commentators are bringing on the table. So this is my position. The entire proposal is good. But we also need to address some of these concerns in order to have a mid position, going forward. And everybody will be happy across the board. That is my position on it.
Let's bring it to your last thought, Mr. Adio. Two things you can do maybe in 1 minute. First, how far-reaching is the argument about equalization that was taken out from the federal government element in the new tax? They say take 5, give it to the state for this equalization as to people like Jigawa and all of that may be at the end of this, the short end of the stick. On the other hand, the issue of how we can use this to jig productivity, because taxation in itself is not productivity, it's just optimization. Your last thought.
Yeah, I mean, the equalization fund that you talked about, I think is a good starter. It can be the basis of negotiation with other states that are falling short. We can find a way to bridge the states that are going to fall behind. We can find a way to insert funding that will bridge the gap for them, at least on a short to mid-term, basis. But you've also raised a very important point that, the debate around this is not a debate that is going to be targeted at driving productivity, because the VAT conversation is not about productivity. It's really about consumption. And that's why I have continuously argued that we can't be wasting a lot of energy on a consumption tax at a time where citizens are struggling to consume. And our responsibility, or the responsibility of government at this moment is to build a bigger pie, or is to bake a bigger pie, lift people out of poverty, create an environment that provides jobs. People can raise wages and raise income. And then we can debate heatedly about how much consumption we want to extract from these citizens. That for me is the way to go. And I think that we can make that progress considerably, if the president and his team can carry his party people along, provide a political solution to the hotly contested part of derivation elements, because like everybody seems to agree, you have a lot of good things or a lot of benefits contained in that bill in terms of reducing corporate taxes, reducing taxes for small businesses, that will certainly help our economy grow in the mid to long term. And so the part that is a bit knotty and a bit contentious, I think that it's important to find a political solution to that so that we can all move forward.
Great point you've made, Ayodele Adio, National Publicity Secretary of the Youth Party, and Zaid Abubakar, Chairman, Kano State Internal Revenue Service, who joined us via Zoom from Port Harcourt. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your insight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll bring you another part of the conversation that you'll love. What is it? You'll find out after this break. Join us again.